During the 2016 election, both Google and Facebook got a considerable amount of criticism for not doing enough to stop the spreading of fake news. Well, now Google and Facebook have both implemented certain policies that go after websites or pages that have misleading or intentionally misleading information about certain people, right? They also are targeting websites that try to pose as their other media outlets, right? So it's good that it's now on their radar and they want to do something about it, but some of those policies might have some issues. Now, Google just announced that it took action against 340 sites that deceive people with their content, including purveyors of fake news in 2016. Close to 200 of these sites no longer are allowed to use Google ads. Okay, so they haven't been banned. Like, they'll still possibly pop up in the Google search engine, but they are not allowing AdSense, which monetizes these pages, to be utilized on the pages.
Yeah, Google doesn't control the internet. Google doesn't own the internet.
Right.
It might seem like it at times, but it doesn't. But what it does do is it powers the internet through monetizing it, and it's through AdSense. So when they turn that off, well, we'll see how much it affects things, because if they were using it as a business model, well, Google might have just killed their business model, so that might help in bringing down the number of fake news sites. But if it turns out people are using it for propaganda, well, they would pay for that anyway. So because for them, the objective is not to make money; it's to influence elections or popular culture or the media.
Yeah, so they're essentially, squeezing some of the revenue that these pages could get. Now, understand, like, the only other way that some of these pages could get the revenue is if they find sponsors, and I think a lot of advertisers stay away from these types of websites anyway.
No advertiser would go on a site
yeah,
like that.
And then no investor is going to invest in that. Let's keep it 100, right?
Yeah. No, look, there was a period on the internet where people would invest in clownish things, like some websites would take other people's articles and just like jumble the words. But people would search for it because they were looking for the same words, and then they would accrue some money and they would get ads, and people paid money to buy those companies, and I thought they were mental, and I was right. A year after buying one of those companies, one of the major media companies immediately shut it down. It's word salad. I mean, man, shockingly enough, it turns out not all media companies are geniuses, and they don't seem to make the right decision every time. But this is different. Nobody's going to go in an investor meeting. Okay, all right, guys, we've got a bunch of fake news, and we trick people with it, and we lie to them all the time. You guys want to invest?
And by the way,
No.
I want to be clear about something. They're not only targeting fake news. And by the way, Google was very careful not to use the phrase fake news when they made their announcement. They're going after individuals who are intentionally misleading the public and also advertising scammers. So ads that scam people about weight loss products and things like that.
And people pretending to be things that they're not. Like,
yes.
Starbucks. We sell coffee, and we have a mermaid with 3, things.
Right, and he's just using that as like a hypothetical.
Yes.
So that's not an actual thing, at least not that I know of. But here's the only problem, and I don't know, maybe you disagree with me on this. So 200 of these pages have now been permanently banned from using Google AdSense and making revenue through that platform. So we don't know who the arbiters are behind the scenes, and we also don't know which websites have now been permanently banned. And so that worries me a little bit.
No, I hear you. If it goes further, then I start to get deeply concerned, right? Because then, remember, the mainstream media thinks that they don't have a bias, but they do. It's not a conservative one, it's not a liberal one, it's an establishment bias. So they view the world through the prism of insiders in basically the major cities that they live in: Washington, New York, LA, and San Francisco. So they think that, the system is fine, the status quo is fine, the government largely tells the truth, or almost always tells the truth until Trump came in, right? The Pentagon's wonderful, et cetera. So if you were to say, hey, I don't believe the government on certain things, they might say, conspiracy theorists. That's their worldview. Now, if they start banning that stuff, that's crazy talk, right? Because their perspective is not the only correct perspective. Even for guys who are mental, like Alex Jones, he's allowed to be mental.
Oh my God, I just realized something. So, I mean, InfoWars peddles ridiculous conspiracy theories that are not based on facts at all. They spread fakes. I mean, the whole Pizzagate thing, they were essential in spreading that ridiculous conspiracy theory that could have gotten people killed, by the way, right? So, I mean, think about where InfoWars makes some revenue, or a considerable amount of revenue. YouTube, which is owned by Google.
No, I hear you. I hope they don't go in that direction, because as much of a lunatic as Alex Jones is, and as much as most of his program is outright fabrications, that's like their opinion, man. So to me, there's a difference between I published a story that I knew to be incorrect, like Harry Reid is now an Elvis impersonator in Vegas. Fun, but not true, right? On the other hand, Anna, that's why this is a little bit dangerous and a very challenging question, because in the middle of saying that, I remembered, wait, Alex Jones told a lie about Harry Reid that's much worse. He said Harry Reid was behind Sandy Hook being a false flag operation.
Yes, look, that's what I'm saying, though. Okay, so look, has Alex Jones at some point reported stories that might be accurate? Sure. But he also intentionally misleads the public about things that are dangerous.
So that's the other problem as to why this is a tricky issue. Because I don't know what Alex Jones actually thinks. It's the ravings of a lunatic mind.
You know what he thinks. Think about, sorry to bring it up, think about what happened at the RNC and how they premeditated that, they planned that out, they completely manipulated the discussion in the media about what they did. They had one of their people lead them onto our stage and pretend like that individual was one of our producers and that they were invited onto our stage. They intentionally do things to lie to people.
No, you're absolutely right about that. So let me make the distinctions. So we know through personal experience that they're brazen liars and they have no attachment to the truth, because, as Anna pointed out, they pretended that one of their own producers was our producer and invited them onto the stage. And afterwards, they said, like with a straight face, like, they invited us on. I can't believe they did this. I'm going to take my shirt off, right? And then they referred to, and you see on the videotape, it's their producer. Of course, none of our producers asked them to be on, and you see who it is. Anyway, but this, like, whether you believe us or them, our point is we know, and we know that he knows. He knows it's his own producer, and he lies about it without blinking. Right. The flip side is he's full-blown mental. I mean, remember the things he said, I
want to go to space. We're under attack. It is an alien force, not of this world. It's the devil, okay?
Okay, now if you watch that whole clip that we showed, he really believes that the Earth is under attack by aliens and the devil. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So now, on the other hand, it's a free country and you're allowed to be mental. So I wouldn't want them shutting down InfoWars. I think that's very scary talk.
You are, of course you're allowed to be mental, right? Your mental statements, as long as they don't incite violence, and in some cases I think that he does incite violence, is protected under our Constitution.
Right.
Google is a private company, and they can make whatever business decision they want to make. So if they watch InfoWars coverage and they realize that, hey, this is actually dangerous, misleading, it's propaganda, Google can make that decision.
Well, Google certainly can. If I was advising Google, I think I would tell them not to, but I'm not advising them, and that's like my opinion, man.
Yeah.
So that's why your original point is a great one, that, yeah, if they're just getting rid of things that are obviously fake, it seems like it's a good thing, and I agree with it, but it does start to go down a slope that is a little dangerous as to who's the arbiter of what's real and what's not. But they certainly don't have to give money through AdSense to people that they think are making stuff up and that are impersonating other people and all the other things that they point out here. Get the full 2-hour show ad-free. Become a member, tytnetwork.com/join.